Century 14 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Ride-On Optics. Ride-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it, finish up your next build, and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rideonoptics.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Mantis X. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching, and you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Mantis is a family of training devices to track your movements while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a shooting drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. You can find them on mantisx.com. And speaking of taking your shooting to the next level, we have a very cool guest tonight. We are interviewing McKenna Geer. She is a Paralympic rifle shooting athlete who competed in Tokyo and Rio, bringing back a bronze medal for America and bringing home gold in the Pan American Games. McKenna holds a master's degree in business administration, and we are stoked to have her with us tonight. McKenna, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me on tonight.
America.
Right on. America. This is a very specific kind of subset of the shooting community. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of where you grew up and how you got involved in the shooting sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born with a disability called arthrogryposis. It affected how my muscles formed in utero as well as some of my joints. And my parents knew that I was going to have this disability before I was born, and they never wanted to let that be something that held me back in life. So from a very young age, my parents, told us that can't wasn't going to be a part of my vocabulary and started enrolling me in as many different activities as possible. So I started playing baseball from a really young age with other kids with disabilities just to kind of get together and hang out. And I then started attending a summer camp for kids with disabilities when I was 5 years old. And the purpose of this camp was to introduce kids with disabilities to the outdoors. The director was a disabled veteran. His name is Ernie Butler. And Ernie wanted to show us as well that disability didn't have to be a limiting factor in our lives. So any activity that he could think of adapting, he brought it out for us. Kayaking, hand cycling, he made wheelchair obstacle courses so that we could learn to use our wheelchairs better. And shooting was actually one of the morning activities that the older kids got to be a part of. So when you turned 12, you got to go shooting with the big kids as we saw it. And my best friend and I turned 12 the same year and got to go shoot some 22s on an outdoor range. And I had a blast. I had, shot a BB gun a couple times with my dad, in the backyard, just plinking around. But it was a little bit different this time because my best friend and I were on a swim team together and we were very competitive with one another and had a little competition that morning of shooting at camp. Ernie saw how much fun I was having. And just a couple months after the camp ended over the winter, he invited me to shoot a match that he was hosting through the NRA. And he was finally able to admit it a couple of years ago, but I actually ended up beating him at that little competition.
Nice.
And what I didn't know is that the Paralympic coach at the time was looking for up-and-coming Paralympic shooting athletes because we had a fairly small team. And a year and a half after I shot at camp for the first time, I was at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center here in Colorado Springs for my first Paralympic shooting camp. So it was kind of a happy accident, if you will, that really wrote the course
escalated
of my
quickly.
life.
I like it. Yeah, very cool. Is that camp still around?
Not anymore.
Is there some equivalent camp that we should steer people to or link to or anything like that?
There aren't any equivalent camps that I know of. there was a group of disabled veterans that were running this camp, and they kind of phased out of running this one. So unfortunately, not really that I know of.
The first thing that stood out to me when you started to tell some of your story was that your parents decided early on that can't was a word that would not be in your vocabulary. Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like from a really young age? And before you got into this camp, was there anything that you remember from your early childhood where that was a factor?
So I couldn't pick out like any specific things that my parents were having me work on, but I just remember like my parents always telling me about, how if there was something that I couldn't do on the first try, how they would really encourage me to figure out a different way to do it. And it may not always look exactly the same as other people do it, but if it worked for me, that's all that mattered. That's
awesome. Really cool. And I think this is something that we talk a lot about when just from a coaching standpoint. I mean, this is something from an early age, you had that kind of growth mindset where, it was a product of effort, and you can work really hard and you can overcome challenges and obstacles and stuff. And it just seems like to get where you have ended up at that world-class level, for anyone that I have read about or talked to that performed on, I won't even say world class, but at a high level,
elite level athlete.
That is a theme that you constantly hear. And before we started recording, that was something that we talked a little bit about another Olympic shooter's book with winning in mind, written by Lanny Basham. And that's a book that you have also read. And so can you talk about what role that has played in your development from these early days of shooting to becoming a Paralympic elite level world-class shooter?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Winning in Mind is actually one of the first books that I received getting into my shooting career. And I was middle school, high school age. So it was a fun read, helped explain more behind a growth mindset that I had already learned at a young age, but I think really just drove that point home and helped figure out what the best route to actually like take control of that growth mindset and, further it for my career.
When I first read that book, it was recommended to me from a world-class special operations type of person. And happens to be on that organization's required reading list, apparently, is what I learned from him. And one of the themes in that book that always stood out to me was it talks a lot about being able to, you're never going to be able to outperform your own self-image, and having your, in your own head, seeing yourself as someone that can perform well and do something well and kind of grow. That's always something that's kind of stood out to me. And it stood out to me in this conversation because you mentioned how that word can't was something that was just never in your vocabulary from a very early age. So I think that's really cool. And I just wanted to highlight that.
Another thing that my parents did, or my dad really did, once I got into the shooting sports, is that when I was training at home, I started out on NRA 10 bowl paper targets. So I would shoot these targets, and my dad started going through my target sheets and cutting out individual targets that had perfect shots on them, and he would tape them everywhere around the house. And even when I go back to my family home to this day, there are still targets taped on the bathroom mirror and in kitchen cabinets and on the back of my bedroom door. So I think that he also perused through with Winning in Mind as well, and really enjoyed picking up on adding those reminders into daily life.
Reinforce the good performance. Yeah, I think, that's awesome.
I love that. It's funny talking about growth mindset and particularly being able to operate, on the spectrum of abilities. The military units, the elite military units, tend to have this real elaborate selection process, right? The SEAL training selection process, that sort of thing. And a lot of it is you either have it or you don't. There are certain things that I can't build in you. You got to bring them to the table, right? But then once I have you, I got to make you better, right? And once we we find someone with the attributes that we're really looking for, how do we grow them from that point? And I don't have a big point with that, but I think it's an interesting thing about military units really struggle with this. Like, do you either have it or not, or can we grow it? And what parts of you can we grow, and what parts of you can't we grow, right? And I think it's particularly interesting, especially, right? We probably can't give you all your muscle function, right? But we can make the muscles you have work amazing. And I think that's really cool. And that's part of, like, you got to get your brain and your body all working kind of in sync. So shifting gears a little bit, our audience is very heavy military, law enforcement, personal defense types. And typically when they think about shooting matches, they're thinking like run and gun, 3-gun and USPSA type matches. Can you talk about what exactly Olympic rifle or Olympic style rifle involves? Is that the one where you like ski and shoot, the one that they always have on TV, or what exactly does this involve?
So the ski and shoot is biathlon, and that I have not done that yet. I would love to go skiing sometime, though. I think it'd be really fun.
Especially in Colorado, right? Like all the skiing.
Right. Yeah. So never had the chance to go skiing because with our shooting events, it's year round. So never really have much of an off season, but I'm taking a bit of a break right now. So maybe we'll look into it this winter. But Olympic and Paralympic style shooting, there are a couple different variations, but the majority of the events are 60 shots over the course of about an hour period. We are shooting air gun and .22 rifle and pistol. And there's also shotgun events in the Olympics as well. They're working on creating shotgun Paralympic events at the moment. So I shoot rifle, and the two different targets that we shoot at, they're all paper, but air gun and the small bore targets are different sizes because we shoot air gun at 10 meters indoors, and the small bore 22 is at 50 meters outdoors. So air gun target is the size of a silver dollar, and the bullseye that we're shooting at is the size of a period in a newspaper. So it's a 0.5 millimeter dot.
Wow.
And then
don't fuck that up.
To make our life even more exciting, we're using electronic target systems, and the electronic targets can further break down that bullseye into tenths of millimeters. And we get decimal scores. So if you hit the bullseye, you get a 10. But depending on how well you're covering the bullseye, you'll get a 10 point something. So a perfect shot would be centering the pellet over that bullseye for a 10.9. If you just barely touch the edge of the bullseye with the pellet, you'd get a 10.0 or a 10.1. And then the scoring rings will go out from there. But with what we're doing, if you're not shooting 10s just about 60 out of 60 times, you're probably not going to make the final.
Have yourself a great day, right? It's hard to wrap your head around that level of precision.
Yeah.
Like a 0.5 millimeter dot, I'm not sure that my visual acuity is going, let alone being able to shoot within the parameters of whatever equipment that I have. But that's impressive. And I'm usually thinking about things like minute of man. It's like, minute of angle, like 1 inch at 100 yards ish. I'm like, yeah, if it's a man-sized target, I could probably hit that. That's about all I got.
So Mike mentioned visual acuity. Are you allowed to have a magnifying scope? You get like a 10 power scope, right? When you're doing this?
Well, actually, no. Everything that we're shooting is peep sights, and the only magnification, if you will, that we're allowed to use are prescription lenses if needed.
Wow.
I get all the prescription lens I could get, right? Yeah. How much time do you have to take your shot?
So the qualification round is 60 shots in about an hour. You can go at your own pace. Some people have a really fast shot process and will finish a match in 35, 40 minutes. And some people are a little bit slower and will literally take down to the second in that match, which gives, I think, all of us competitors a little bit of anxiety as we're watching them finish.
Imagine. So this might explain a little bit why you don't see a whole lot of this on TV, right? It is it is an interesting and intense competition, but it's also not a very visually engaging competition. It's a lot of people holding as still as they possibly can for an hour.
Correct.
And punching holes in paper, right? So,
and you need a really, really, really big camera lens
to see anything.
But it's,
yes.
Yeah,
so they do,
but it's still badass, right? Like
they do try and make the so the qualification round. They add up the score from those 60 shots to get your total score, and then the top 8 people actually move on to a finals round where it is elimination style, and everything starts over from 0. And in this, you will shoot shots on command, so you'll typically have about 30 or 50 seconds, depending on the competition that you're shooting. So 2 of my 3 events are at that 30 seconds per shot. And when you reach the 12th shot, they will eliminate 8th place. 14th shot is 7th place, and so on up until you get to shot 24 that will decide gold and silver. So that helps make it a little bit more exciting for spectators. It's a little bit more nerve-wracking. On those 50-meter events where we're shooting outdoors, we have to take wind into consideration, and 30 seconds isn't a lot of time to do that. So a little bit more exciting.
Yeah.
Is there a wind limit? Like if it's, more than 30 miles an hour, or you're just like, no, screw it, we're going?
I personally have not seen any events canceled because of having too strong of wind. If it's too bad of a storm, they will cancel or postpone the match until that will pass, especially if there's lightning. But I've seen some pretty windy days that some people have shot through.
It doesn't take much to push a projectile that small either.
Yeah. How often are you shooting the small bore, the 22 versus air rifles?
So air rifle is 2 of my 3 events, and then the small bore is 1. So I'll usually divide up my time pretty similarly. So half to 2/3 of my time is air gun.
Is there one you like better between the 2?
I like both of them for different reasons. I like air gun because of how precise it is and how much, how mental air gun is. And then I like small bore because it's not just of how good of a technical shooter you are, but also bringing in the added factors of weather and wind, etc.
Interesting. So a little sideline on that, and granted, totally different worlds. At various times in the last 10 years, 15 years, it has been very tough to find ammo for most of the shooting sports. It's been tough to find 9mm and 5.56 mil. When I have gotten desperate for ammo, I have switched to pellet guns, and I can almost always find pellets, and at least kind of keeps me doing my off-duty practice and working on fundamentals. So air gun typically doesn't get much attention in the shooting world, but I think it's always worth keeping in your back pocket, especially when you're having a tough time finding bullets. Can you tell us about your gun? What do you have?
So both of my guns come from Germany. They're on-shoots rifles. Really, once you get to the elite level air gun and 22s, a lot of them come from Germany or Italy or, wherever it may be. And it's really personal preference on the rifle. So when people see a picture of my rifle for the first time, they think it looks like something out of Star Wars. My stock is like a baby blue color, and people have no idea what everything does on it because every single part of that gun is adjustable to fit my position and my body.
So how much difference does the gun make, right? So the difference between a $1,000 competition gun and a $5,000 competition gun, I imagine at your level you can tell the difference, but like at what level of competition does that actually start making a difference, would you say?
When you're starting to work towards national team status to want to go to that international level, there are high school air rifle and small bore teams as well. So if you're looking to get on a college team, you're probably going to need one of the nicer guns as well. Because we are splitting hairs in air gun, especially. So
literally,
like literally, that's the level of precision we're talking. Like,
yeah. So a little sideline on that. So typically when a lot of people think of precision shooting, they think of like snipers and sharpshooters and stuff like that. Is there, do you ever like train back and forth with people who do that sort of shooting, or do you take ideas from them, or is there any cross flow between like what a sniper does versus kind of the type of sharpshooting you do?
I'm sure that there probably is. Have I ever looked into it? No, not really. But I think some of those guys are absolutely amazing, and I'd love to try it sometime.
So my understanding is it's a lot of crawling. It's like what they do.
I'd skip
crawling.
that part.
Yeah,
That's fair.
So one of the things that I really love about the shooting sports, and I've posted this on Tactical Tangents. In fact, every time I share your stuff on Tactical Tangents, I point out that shooting is the great equalizer, right? You can be a big dude or a small statured female or across the ability kind of spectrum, and you can kind of level the playing field in shooting. And I think that's really cool. And specifically, people of all physical conditions can compete kind of alongside each other. Can you talk us through kind of what adaptations and accommodations Paralympics makes for you for the shooting sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the Paralympic side of shooting, there are two main classifications. You are either able to physically support the rifle on your own, or you're physically unable to support the rifle on your own. So that basically means you either have some sort of upper body disability or you don't. So you actually go through a full medical classification to work through how your body works and moves to make sure everything is fair. So those who can support the rifle on their own will shoot, maybe they have a prosthetic leg and they'll shoot their small bore events laying on the ground. Or maybe they're a paraplegic and will shoot in their wheelchairs, but still have to work to support the rifle on their own. For my events, because my disability does affect my upper body, I get to shoot off of what we call a spring stand. So it's a Y-shaped yoke that comes down into a spring that can then either attach to the wheelchair or an offhand stand or a table, and we'll get to rest the gun on that. So the reason it's a spring is because they are trying to mimic the Olympic style positions as much as possible. So I'll tell a lot of people that I shoot prone and standing events sitting out of my wheelchair. So in standing, I get to rest the gun on that spring stand, but there is no support under my elbows. When I shoot prone, I have a table attachment that goes onto my wheelchair, and I get to rest my elbows on that platform like a prone shooter would on the ground.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I was just watching a video of this just to kind of paint the picture. So effectively, a lot of times she's shooting off what amounts to a bipod, except the bipod has some wobble induced in it with this spring. And F that.
It's like shooting from a Swiss ball or something.
What is it? The balance ball that people have in their offices? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, like that sounds awful.
There's a in some of our positional shooting courses we've done at like SWAT schools and stuff. We'll do some nighttime events where we take like a wooden pallet and we put it on a couple like traffic cones, and you make it so that you have to suspend this thing kind of in the air and balance it in a way, and then you're shooting like an 8-inch circle man-sized target. It's not you're not taking periods off at the end of sentences.
Fair.
On the top of
some of our Olympic athletes will actually use smaller balance boards to work on their core and their hold while they're shooting, though.
Yeah,
that's cool. As far as being able to shoot kind of on an equal playing field, do you often shoot with your Olympic counterparts? Do you shoot with like Ginny Thrasher, in the next lane over sometimes, practice together, anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. We train together all the time, and I think it's a good push for the both of us. I will say, though, we don't usually compete against each other, though, because we can be a little bit more stable than the Olympic positions. Our scores can be a little bit higher averages overall. But
That's
I actually just talked to Ginny the other week, and we were talking about training on the line and playing games all the time to, get out of a rut and fight off some boredom during that training.
That's cool.
That's actually a good segue into some training stuff. One of the things that you talked about earlier was wanting to be able to ski, but that you train year round and there's never really an off season. Can you talk about your training schedule and how much time of every day or every week gets put into training?
Yeah, so a typical training day will be on the range from about 8 until noon. Not always directly shooting, but training, working on equipment, working with our coaches. We'll take a break from about noon until 1 for lunch. And then the afternoons would kind of depend on the day and what we were working on. So some days we would come back for an afternoon session from about 1 until 3. Some days we would go over to the gym and have a strength and conditioning session. The training center has a full sports medicine and recovery team on complex. So we may go schedule an appointment with them to either recover from an injury or just have some time to relax and go get a massage. We also have nutritionists and sports psychologists that we will meet with as well. So depending on the day and the week and what our plan looks like for the upcoming competitions, we can do any of those things in the afternoon.
And specifically the role of, you mentioned at the end there, just nutritionist and sports psychology. What does that look like, and what role does that play big picture in your performance?
Nutrition is a huge aspect of what we're doing on the line, because we are splitting hairs with our bullseye and need to make sure that our body is working with us as much as possible. So we try to maintain glucose levels not only throughout our match, but we're also looking to make a final that will occur a couple hours after the match ends. So we need to make sure that we don't have any spikes in glucose levels. We don't have any dips, because if we go too high or too low, we can end up getting jittery or shaky, which is not conducive to good scores.
Yeah, what about caffeine and alcohol? Those are actually my two key questions. Speaking of sports nutrition, like, do you stay off it completely, or go hardcore on the caffeine the morning of and just jitter through it? What do you do?
So the caffeine actually depends on the athlete. I am a hardcore supporter of not touching it at all before training or before a match, because I am the type that gets super strung up and jittery off of a cup of coffee. My teammates tell me to cut it back some travel days because I'm a little over the top. And then some people live off of their morning cup of coffee, and their body has become so used to it that the coffee doesn't affect them. So usually the main point that we go with is, if it's your routine, don't mess with your routine. Keep everything the same. A lot of people will eat the same breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or very similar, every day of competition, to make sure that they're not introducing anything rogue into their plan. So the same can apply with alcohol. Some will enjoy an occasional social drink, and others will keep a routine, have their beer every night. It just depends on the person.
I always fly better with a couple shots. It's true.
Right. And you started to talk also about the sports psychologist. Can you talk about that a little bit and what that involves?
Absolutely. So sports psychologists will meet with, depends on what we need. I usually would meet with them once a week to a couple times a month. And a lot of what we're doing is, we actually have a lot of mindfulness involved with our shooting sports, because when we're shooting a match, our brains never shut off, right? So we can't always control the thoughts that are coming into our head, but we are often trying to learn to acknowledge them and move on and focus back on what we were doing. So a lot of us will choose to focus on our shot process while we're shooting, which I think mine's about a page long in a notebook somewhere.
Wow.
But working through each individual step of our shot process, and the sports psychologist can really help us refine those mindfulness skills, as well as help us address anything that we need to work through outside of the range. Because if we're bringing life outside of the range into shooting sessions, we're going to get distracted and not be focused on what we need to be doing.
Very cool.
I like that. So, as it happens, we just wrapped up a series of podcast episodes about physical conditioning and training and nutrition, dealing with the theme that a tactical operator should train like a champion. And I'm kind of cynical and jaded about that because often it means we bring in human performance people who want me to do deadlifts. And that is like, and that's great, except I'm a pilot. I don't have to do a whole lot of deadlifting in my job. And so for reasons that escape me, that's kind of what it turns into, and doing like wind sprints with like a parachute on my back and that sort of thing. So I would actually really like to hear from you what training like a champion means, because I actually think this might be a much more focused picture of what we're really trying to get to.
Yeah, so our strength and conditioning sessions, strength side will really focus in on shoulders and core because we're holding a rifle and trying to stand or sit still for extended periods of time, hours throughout the day. My strength coach likes to also round out everything else out as well, so I can actually walk a little bit, and he'll incorporate leg exercises for me as well to improve that function. And then conditioning is super important for us to keep a lower resting heart rate, because when we get nervous, get worked up, something goes wrong, we need to learn to not only control our body's reaction to what happened through that mindfulness, but having the lower resting heart rate to begin with will also help pull that down as well.
Will your heartbeat affect your shot?
Yes. Yes, it will.
That is intense.
Yes, it is.
You might be able to hold your breath. You probably can't hold your heart. But so what do you do? What do you personally do to like keep your composure? Like when things are going well, how do you keep your composure? And then when things are not going well, you throw a shot or whatever, how do you get back into the game?
Acknowledging that it happened, whether you have a good or a bad shot, each of those can pull a reaction out of you. And a lot of what I have tried to work on is not reacting to things that are happening, but choosing a response. So if it's a really good shot, having positive self-talk, be like, yeah, you're really, really good at this. Let's keep that up. Let's do that again. And focusing
do that again.
Back in on that shot process. If we have if we throw a bad shot, which absolutely happens, taking a look at it, being like, yep, okay, I think I noticed that, I missed this step of my shot process, or I overheld the shot too much, and that's why it flew out. So now that we've, analyzed that, what are we going to do? Well, probably got to go back to that shot process and make sure that we're following all of those steps.
Can you always tell when a shot goes wrong, why it went wrong? Because like, I imagine we're talking such small variables here. It could be goddamn anything, I would think, like like you breathed, or something with the gun, or of course it's the gun's fault, or the heartbeat, right? Like
the darn thing.
How do you troubleshoot, so to speak, when the shot goes, it's down and left, right? I imagine you're not doing the traditional like, well, the shot went down and left, so I probably pulled down on the trigger kind of thing, or maybe you are, I don't know.
Sometimes we can tell what is happening and sometimes we can't. A lot of that will come down to how close of attention we're paying to our follow through. So we are actually actively calling our shots after we take them. That's something that I've always needed to work on because it's not my strongest skill. But if we are accurately calling shots and paying attention after that shot breaks, there are a lot of times that we can tell, oh, you want to know what? I did overhold that a couple seconds too long, or I didn't hold my follow through as long as I should have, or my NPA, natural point of aim, was just a little bit to the left as I was approaching the target. So I think that's why the shot drifted left when I took it.
Go ahead.
This is really fascinating to me because I'm a process nerd. I really think about like results versus process orientation and stuff like that. And one of the things that you said in there, and this is another thing that comes up a lot in some of the stuff that I teach to police officers, is what positive self-talk is. And there's a class that I teach that
you're good enough, you're strong enough,
like,
you're pretty,
right,
people like you.
You stand in the
right?
mirror and like, I am beautiful, and there's a famous quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but Viktor Frankl, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor, and one of the famous quotes in that book, he says, between every stimulus and response is a choice, or is a space, and in that space there is a choice, right? Something to that effect. And this speaks exactly to that. It's like, okay, I screwed something up in here, and there's two parts to this. One is, hey, I know how to do this. This is something that I'm capable of doing, and so what do I need to do to get it right? Well, it turns out you already know the process to get it right, and so you just have to kind of circle back into that reality where I have a whole page filled with the exact process of what I need to do to put the bullet exactly where I want it. So let's go back to that. And this is a big deal because in my line of work, in Jim's line of work, and a lot of people that listen to the show in their line of work, they work in jobs that have consequences, and that, much like in competition, I imagine, things happen. Like, things go not the way that we want them sometimes. And how do you bounce back from that? And there's something about competition, I think, and competitors, people who are serious competitors in the world, that teaches you that resilience and all the stuff that comes with it, right? Getting the process down, and what productive self-talk, right? Whether we call it positive self-talk or whatever, but what that sounds like in our own heads. And I think that's all really, really cool. And so I think this is one of those things that if this resonates with anyone listening, you need to go back and listen to everything that McKenna just said a couple times and kind of pick that apart, because there's some gold in there that I think we can all take something from. So I just wanted to highlight that stuff, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah. Speaking of resilience, have you ever had a time in training where you just wanted to quit? You're like, screw this, I'm done. I'm going to go, be a Walmart greeter or whatever. Like, have you ever gotten to that point where, like, I don't want to deal with this anymore? And what did you do to get yourself back into the game?
There definitely have been times. And honestly, if it's gotten to the point where I want to walk away from the gun, completely career ending sort of, wow, what am I doing with my life? I need to go take that break, because I am too deep into whatever issue I have made a mountain out of in my head while I'm training, and oftentimes taking a step back and breathing for a minute just to put that mountain back into a molehill, and really focusing on the reason why I got into the sport in the first place. So if I need to go, put the gun away for that training session and come back to it the next day, I will. And I think it took a long time for me to learn that. But if you continue to spiral down wow, I've really screwed this up road, it's not going to produce a productive training session.
I like that. Can you talk to us about coaching and like what your interaction with your coach is like?
Yeah, so I've had a couple different coaches throughout the last 10 years of my career, and work a lot with them on like we try to plan out our goals for the year pretty early. We'll have our competition calendar and take a look, and before competitions, we want to be, tapering down on training a little bit so we can peak by the time we get to that competition. And when we get back from competition, we'll look at taking a break. So there's a lot of like fine details in the planning. I know that on one of my computers, I have a spreadsheet written out of when I want to be, focusing more on volume, or when I want to be tapering off of the volume and, focusing on more intense shots, and then tapering the intensity down into maintenance right before we leave, just, reconfirming, yep, know how to do this. My guns are working. All right, let's go get on a plane. And then with my coach, we'll evaluate the competition. when we get back, what went well, what didn't work out quite so well. Is there any equipment that needs to be attended to before we move on into the technical side of the sport? So coaches are huge part of what we're doing on a daily basis. And they'll often, catch the little things during training sessions that we may not always be paying attention to. So looking over your shoulder, be like, are you sure you're following through as long as you should be right now? No? You want to focus on that again? All right.
I like that. Is there a difference in your mind between what makes a good coach and what makes a great coach?
Absolutely. And I think it's attention to detail. You can be a good coach and tell people how to do things, but if you're not catching the really minute things that people are doing right or wrong on the line, you're not going to be able to help them grow. And I also think that being able to connect with each athlete that you're coaching is a huge part of it as well, because every athlete is going to work differently than the person next to them on the line. So being able to cater their coaching to each individual's needs has been super helpful with some of the best coaches that I've had.
Very cool.
What, how much dry fire do you do?
Pretty good amount. One of the coaches that I had, he wasn't local in the area, but when he would give us our training plans for the week over the phone, we were not allowed to touch our tin of pellets until we finished a half-hour dry fire in the morning. There were times when he was out at the center for a camp where he would take all of our tins of pellets and wouldn't give them to us until he thought that we had approached our dry fire both with a good attitude and were able to execute dry fire shots in a perfect manner.
So would it be fair to say that you are a firm believer in dry fire, advocate for dry fire, and for anyone who takes shooting seriously for any reason, sport, whatever, protection, professional, military law enforcement, what percentage of their time should be spent in live versus dry fire, if that is something that you have thought about?
I am a huge believer in dry fire. I don't know if I could put a percentage on it, but what I've noticed between dry fire and live fire, you can notice more of your process when you are doing dry fire. Because when you're doing live fire, you get an outcome from it. You're getting a score. You're putting a hole through paper. You're hitting the bullseye. You're not hitting the bullseye. So if you're always focused on getting that outcome, you're not always focused on the process. So I think the dry fire can really, really help hone in on any issues that you may be having during that shot process.
I love it.
Mike is our process expert, and I am our outcome expert on the show. So along these lines, can you talk to us about kind of shooting fundamentals and what that means to you and in the context of the type of shooting you do? Do you do anything different from like a hunter or, just somebody out on a firing line out at, Dragon Man's out in Colorado Springs? Or, and do you have a routine in your head for each shot? Like in my community, it's relax, aim, inhale, depress the trigger, don't squeeze the trigger, don't pull the trigger.
Apparently hers is a page long.
I honestly really want to see that. Like, if you can get a picture of that, we will post it. Like, that is...
Unless it's proprietary and top secret,
It's definitely not, but I wish I would have found my shooting journal before we started today, because I have it all written out, but I am taking a break from shooting, and I don't know where my journal is at this moment in time. Don't tell my coach.
Hey, but that's another important key thing is keeping a journal, right? And that's something that Jim is really big on, is the difference between science and screwing around is writing stuff down, right? And so having a journal, keeping track of that performance, there's something to be said just in that by itself.
Oh, absolutely. So my shot process, I literally write down and go through in my head every single action that I am taking during a shot. So I have a loader that will put the pellet or the bullet into the gun for me. So my shot process always starts when they close the action. So they'll lift the gun up and put it on the stand for me, make sight adjustments for me while I'm shooting, as well as put the bullet in. So my shot process starts when the loader closes the action, and then we'll go from there. So close the action, take a deep breath, check my cheek position, check my butt plate position in my shoulder, my grip pressure for each hand. So every little minute thing I'm paying attention to. So we're probably a little more detailed than hunters are, a little bit more in depth and paying a little bit more attention to every little thing.
Well, because it turns out when you're trying to shoot like an elk, it's you don't need to hit a 0.5 millimeter target or something.
Nope, you sure don't. So, yeah. And we're a very precise sport that precisely anything can affect it. So if we stray from our shot process, forget to take a breath, and we end up overholding because of that, we may not end up with a great shot.
I like it.
Oh, found it. So this is a quick picture of it, and then I'll also read it to you as well. But so we have close the action, grip placement, butt plate placement, left hand placement, deep breath, plant cheek, NPA and sight alignment, place finger on trigger, take up first stage, deep breath, straight approach, deep breath and hold, center on the target, let the shot break, follow through, call the shot and analyze, deep breath to relax, side adjustment, and open the action to load.
That's a lot more than grip sights trigger. Grip sights trigger. Grip sight. That's right. That's what's usually the caveman over here is just the.
I dig the contrast. The contrast is cool. I saw an interview with Ali Reisman. I think it was Ali Reisman. One of the famous gymnasts was talking about, what are you doing? What are you thinking about during this part of your floor routine? Some real exciting part of her gymnastic routine. And she was like, the only thing I'm thinking about in this part of the floor routine is squeezing my butt cheeks. That's the only thing.
Fair.
And I'm like, okay, fundamentals, right? That's what she needed to do. We like talking about taking lessons across domains, right? Like, is there something that maybe the SEALs are doing that cops should be stealing from them, or things the cops are doing that maybe the Army Rangers should be stealing from them? Are there any insights that you have built over your time in competition that you think the rest of the shooting disciplines should probably pay more attention to or learn from, that you can pass from your community out to the other communities?
I mean, one of the biggest things that I've learned is just learning to respond instead of reacting. Taking a second to really focus on what you're doing and making sure that you're not letting any outside distractions pull you from the task at hand.
And that's you could apply that to literally anything. I mean, that doesn't have to be a shooting thing. That can take you places in life.
And I'm sure you've used this word so far, but like focus seems to be a very, very intense part of what you do. Can you speak just to the word focus and what that means to you and how you get to it? And
well, they say that our sport is 90% mental, 10% physical. So by focus, we are focused for hours every single day on every step in our shot routine and calling shots and analyzing what we're doing. So that focus can be a key word that we'll literally focus in on. When we're doing mindfulness, use the word focus as a trigger point, if you will, to bring our mind back into the task at hand and what we're doing. Anything can pull us away from our shot process, any intrusive thought, somebody walking behind us on the range, cell phone ringing down the hall. So, we have to learn ways to pull our focus back into that task at hand. And it's a huge part of what we're doing.
Do you wear ear pro when you shoot?
We do. That doesn't mean it always blocks out every distraction that's happening behind us.
Do you have any suggestions for shooting ranges and shooting instructors, like who want to make their programs more inviting to persons with disabilities? What can they do to be part of the solution, not part of the problem?
Keeping an open mind. I think a lot of people can be intimidated by the thought of trying to help someone with a disability get onto the range, not knowing exactly how to make that work. And I think a lot of the time that we can come in with some pretty good ideas. We just need someone willing to make that happen. When I first got started, my coach quite literally went dumpster diving to find pieces for my wheelchair that would make my position better or even help me shoot in the first place. So being creative and keeping an open mind, I think are a huge part of getting more people with disabilities into the range.
I like that. And kind of along those lines, I come from a generation demographic where old fat white guys, where we always feel like we're going to say something wrong or inadvertently offend somebody. Mostly because I have said plenty of wrong things, and I have inadvertently offended people all throughout my life. And I realize you don't speak for everyone across the ability, world, but can you give us any insights or pointers on how to make sure our interactions are positive, and specifically for our law enforcement audience? Can you give any insights to help make sure our cops are doing as well as they possibly can working with people with disabilities?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest components is just being an honest, friendly person. Go in knowing that you're going to make a mistake, but not being afraid to make that mistake. I've had so many people not want to come approach me because they were afraid of saying the wrong thing or offending me. I'd say that, a lot of us are used to that, and we know how to talk to people who may feel uncomfortable at first. And I think just being willing to make that first interaction is a huge step into, bridging what can seem like a huge divide sometimes.
I have a story about this. When I was in elementary school, we had a class of visually impaired kids, and not all of them were totally blind, but most of them were totally blind. And the thing that I learned at that age in interacting with these other kids, and that's what they were just other kids, it turns out it's no secret to them that they were blind. And so you can ask questions, and you can, because a lot of it I think is a curiosity, maybe, I don't know, that people struggle with that. And just ask the questions, and if there's an interest, and like you said, you can have an open mind and adapt to it. It's okay. It's not a secret to them. That has been my experience. I don't know if that fits in with what you're saying, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not a secret that, we have some sort of disability that we're living with on a daily basis. And, we get a lot of different looks and comments and stares, and we notice 90% of them. We may not always react to the majority of them, but we notice. So it's going to be more awkward if you're sitting there trying to decide whether or not to say something, because
right.
We probably already noticed your awkwardness,
right,
and your confusion about whether or not to come say something. A lot of us will, put boundaries out there. If you come up and ask us about our disability right off the bat without even saying hello, we're probably not going to appreciate that. But if you say hello, how you doing, get to know us a little bit, and then, ask out of curiosity, some will answer, some won't. But we always appreciate you coming up and just saying hi.
So there's a lesson there. If you want to not be a dick, just don't be a dick, right? Talk to humans and do human things, right? One of my confessions on this, when I first started watching McKenna's shots back in 2015, 2016, somewhere in there, every video I'd seen, she was shooting from the wheelchair. And then I saw a video of her stand up and walk around, and I'm like, "¿Qué pasó? Are you healed? What happened? And I actually messaged you. I went through my old messages and you explained very eloquently, no, that is part of my condition, is that I can get up and walk around. I just, sometimes need the assistance of the wheelchair, if I remember that right. So kind of a fun story there. Speaking of touchy subjects, it seems sometimes like athletes in the shooting sports, especially the Olympic shooting sports, have to kind of walk a tightrope about politics and gun politics. Guns are, I don't know if you've noticed, guns are kind of a touchy issue. But you mentioned yourself that you started out shooting NRA competitions, for example, and you're, in my opinion, such a great face for the shooting community, such a great spokesman for the shooting community. Can you speak to that at all, and kind of where you stand with that, and kind of your message related to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Guns are a hot topic here in the United States, and they have been for a little while. And I think the hardest part of being a shooting athlete is getting compared to, a lot of the negative things that can occur with guns. And the majority of us athletes want to shine the light on responsible gun ownership and, shooting rifles or pistols as an elite level sport that can take you to the Olympics or the Paralympics. So I think, like you said, trying to be a spokesperson and, show the good gun owners that are being responsible and doing, everything right. Because we're trying to enjoy a sport that we became a part of and that wrote the course of our life. And it can be hard some days. It definitely can be hard some days, but just proud that we get to represent the sport in such a unique way.
Very cool. It occurred to me while we were talking about that, range safety. Are there any unique range safety considerations for Paralympics, like for handling if someone needs to go down range or anything like that, or is it exactly the same as you would see on like a typical rifle range?
The biggest difference that I've seen is that we use CBIs, clear barrel indicators. So for us, it's actually a piece of weed whacker cord that will go through the entire length of the rifle. And if anybody needs to go downrange to fix an issue, which is rare, but it does happen, everybody on the line has to insert that CBI, and the range officers will walk up and down the line to make sure not only that the gun is down on the bench, but that the CBI is in it as well.
Weed whacker cord.
Clever. Huh. I like it.
Because it's plastic, so it's not going to damage the inside of the barrels.
Yeah. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, we're stealing that. Do you ever shoot in the other disciplines? Like, do you pack a Glock when you're out in town? Do you just go to the range and blast?
I doubt any Paralympic shooter goes to the range and blasts. Like,
maybe they just don't know.
It's like doing a mag dump today.
I mean, some people could. I don't know. I won't speak for everybody, but I mean, to be completely honest, the majority of my time is focused just on Olympic Paralympic style shooting. Similar to wanting to try skiing this winter, I don't usually have the free time to get involved with other areas of the shooting sports. It was definitely something that I would love to get more involved with. Just haven't had the time.
Well, and there's a key, lesson in just that. You want to reach that level of shooting, that level of performance in anything. It's a commitment, and talk about the amount of time and detail and energy and effort and focus, like we said, that goes into that. That's, you don't get to pick up new hobbies around elite performance. That's, it takes that level of commitment.
It really does.
Yeah. Speaking of your free time, what do you do when you're not doing this? Like, what does your life outside of shooting look like?
Well, I am a wife. I'm a dog mom. And then I actually work at the Olympic and Paralympic museum that opened in downtown Colorado Springs in July of 2020. So the museum approached athletes at the training center before they opened up and wanted to work with our schedules. So I took them up on that offer. And actually, when Tokyo got postponed, I started at the museum and did that in lieu of training when the training center was shut down and I couldn't train. And then when I was getting ready to go to Tokyo this year, they let me and were super supportive of me taking 4 months off to get ready for Tokyo.
That's cool.
Very cool. So we are very interested in personal security and personal safety for everybody, across the spectrum of abilities and physical statures, and particularly for people who can't run when there's trouble and people who can't fight off an attacker and go brawling. What has been your experience with personal security, and do you have any insights that we can learn from you on that?
It's actually something I'm still in the process of learning myself. I moved into the training center a week after I graduated high school and would travel with the Paralympic team and chose not to go out without any of my other teammates or friends from other countries. So, my method was always to travel in a group and to make sure I trusted the people I was with.
Yeah, that's which is solid.
Yeah. I'm going to jump on that. There are some people who see there's like a gender aspect to that, like girls get told their whole lives they're never supposed to go out alone or something like that. I will tell you that is a special operations truth. You don't want to be alone. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a Navy SEAL, you want a buddy with you, right? Like that's universal. So I'm a big fan of 2 people are twice as hard to outnumber. 4 people are 4 times as hard to outnumber. I'm a big fan of that.
A buddy or like a lot of buddies.
All your buddies. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sticking with the group is, a huge part of my philosophy for right now. I have also been looking into like carry styles for myself as well. But again, with not having a ton of time outside of my specific sport, it's something that my husband and I are looking into a little bit more now that I'm taking a break.
I'm trying to picture in my head, McKenna goes into like get her concealed handgun license at some range in Colorado Springs, and some gun shop FUD is going to be like, all right, so what you got to do here is focus on your front sight.
They're going to, all right, little lady, you need this little pink revolver. Yeah.
Pretty sure McKenna's going to do all right with the Glock 19 or whatever she chooses.
We'll see.
If that was the route she was going to go, I'm just saying.
No, it's great.
So, how can we support athletes like you? Like, I think I came across you on accident. I was Googled shooting sports, something like that, and I saw a couple of YouTube videos of you and Ginny Thrasher shooting, something like that. Not together, but separate videos. How do we support you?
Following our stories, sharing our stories, getting the word out about what we're doing. A lot of us, especially on the Paralympic side, aren't just doing our sport for ourselves. We got into it, through other people, through watching mentors in the games before us. And the biggest support is getting, especially kids with disabilities, but really anybody with a disability, showing them what options are out there. So one of my biggest goals through my career is to change the life of another kid that was told no in the same manner that I was.
I like that. Are there any sponsors who have been particularly helpful that deserve a shout out?
Oh, absolutely. Especially the last couple years. I actually wear orthotics on both of my feet. So Hanger Clinic not only makes my orthotics, but actually sponsors their athletes and clients as well. The Women's Sport Foundation actually gave me a grant to help me get ready for Tokyo, as well as the Challenged Athletes Foundation, as well as Elite Shooting Sports of Montana. Definitely couldn't be here without any of those guys, or really anybody who's followed along my story, because I wouldn't be here without the people behind me.
Very cool. What's next for you? You said you're taking a break. Is there a next?
Unknown. So with Tokyo becoming a 5-year quad, I don't think I was willing to admit it to myself before Tokyo, but I was a little burnt out from that extra year. It was a crazy year for absolutely everybody. So, everybody around the world was impacted by it in some way. And I was really, really tired by the time we finished out Tokyo. So been enjoying taking a break. My husband and I just adopted a new puppy. So I've been enjoying puppy training.
I'll keep you busy.
Oh, absolutely. So going to take a break through the beginning of the year and see where we're at, reevaluate at that point.
Very cool.
It's important. Recovery, rest and recovery goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Right. Do you plan to stick around Colorado?
Not even really sure about that either. I have family in Washington, and my husband's family is actually here in Colorado, and everybody has been kind of mentioning Montana, so might see what we'll do. And what I love about the shooting sports is that, find a target and you can take it with you. You can shoot air gun inside I shot when I first got started. My dad moved all of his woodworking tools to the side so I could shoot straight through the middle, diagonally through the middle of his wood shop.
That's awesome.
I want to shoot your dad. I think that would be cool as hell.
He's pretty neat. I like him a lot.
I think that's all I have, big picture question wise. Do you have a message that you want to pass to the rest of the shooting world? Is there anything that our audience should take from you?
My biggest thing to pass on, especially to kids, is to not let anybody else decide what you can and can't do. You get to decide what it is you want to do in life, so don't let anybody hold you back from that.
Very cool. Mike?
There's so much here to unpack. I think that any one of our listeners and hopefully some new ones that come across this can find little pearls of wisdom in this interview. So I really have nothing to add. I think it was really cool, and there's a lot that can be said about performance and the attention to detail and focusing on process and all these things and the mental resilience side of stuff and mental toughness. I mean, we can go on all day. So I think this was awesome. McKenna, thanks for being here. This was really cool.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on.
Yeah, one last thing I want to hit as I think about it is I've mentioned before that I think McKenna is a great face for the shooting community. And one of the reasons I think that is her communication skills. She's very clear and concise and passionate and credible with her speech, especially. And I think there are good lessons we could all take from that. I think that law enforcement could take that. I think military could take that. I think the gun enthusiast community could take a lot from that. So listen to her and listen to how she explains how she got here and what she's doing. I think there's a good lesson in communication there that's worth focusing on. So thank you so much, McKenna. I'm glad we got you on the show. This was cool.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
So this episode was also brought to you by Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution. Drip Drop was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption of water and electrolytes into the parts of your body that need it. You can find it on dripdrop.com or even on Amazon. And if you're military and law enforcement and you're working where it's hot out, get your supply guy to buy it for you. You can get it in bulk on GSA Advantage or through the National Stock Number System. It's hot out. It's always hot where Mike and I work. I like the watermelon flavor. Go get you some.
And this episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem of how to rack the slide every time you press the trigger in dry fire training. One of the bad habits it took me a long time to break was proper trigger follow through. I probably should have talked to McKenna about that at some point. In dry fire especially, and the Dry Fire Mag will help you eliminate that problem almost immediately. Go buy a Dry Fire Mag and double your training reps in just a few minutes a day at dryfiremag.com. Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money is going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are at Tact Tangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. That's all I got, Jim.
Be safe out there, and competition makes us better.
Yeah.
So try one.
And suck less.
Yep.
All right. Good talk.